Police have identified the little boy as Thomas Valva. It was a week ago when police say they responded to a report of a boy who'd fallen in a Center Moriches driveway. That boy, we know again to be Thomas Valva now, had been taken to a local hospital where police say he was pronounced dead.
On January 17, 2020, Thomas Valva passed away from hypothermia after spending the night on the chilly floor of his father's garage. He had just turned 8, and his father was a glorified NYPD officer. After his mother, Justyna Zubko-Valva, and father, Michael Valva, divorced in 2017, Thomas and his brothers, Anthony and Andrew, spent half of their time with their father and his then-fiancee, Angela Pollina. What is the story here? Why was the life of a child taken by those who were meant to protect and care for him? Will justice be served? Join us as we delve into the tragic story of Thomas Valva. This story takes us back to 2020. On January 17, the police received a call to a Long Island address where they were told that an 8-year-old boy had fallen in the driveway while waiting for the school bus. They received this call around 9:40 a.m.
Hi, do you need the police?
I need ambulance immediately. My son's not breathing.
Okay, stay on the line. Your son, who's not breathing, how old is he? How old is he?
8.
8?
Yes. He fell down, he banged his head.
Okay.
He's okay.
Okay.
Sometimes I take him in the shower to try and help him out a little bit. Stop breathing.
Okay.
CPR.
County Fire Rescue number 50, sir. What's your name?
My name is Michael. I'm a police officer with the city of New York. My son, I don't know if he's breathing or not. I don't know if his heart stopped. He fell down on his way to the bus. He banged his head pretty good. I brought him in, and I'm doing CPR right now.
All right. How old is he?
8 years old.
Okay. Do you need any instructions, sir?
I just need somebody to get here quick.
Listen, I already sent them, okay? Help is already on the way.
When the police arrived, they found Thomas in the basement while his father was performing CPR. According to the paramedics, Thomas was naked without any blankets and his sweatpants pulled down to his knees. When he arrived at Long Island Community Hospital with a body temperature of 76 degrees, he was pronounced dead. The cause of death was determined to be homicide, with hypothermia playing a significant role. This clearly had domestic abuse written all over it. Michael Valva, Thomas's father, works for the NYPD as a police officer. He is a 40-year-old man who was then engaged to Angela Pollina, a 42-year-old woman. The two of them together were the parents of 6 children. While Angela has a 6-year-old daughter and 2 twin 11-year-old girls, Michael has 3 sons, Thomas, who is 8, and 2 other sons, who are 6 and 10 years old. At that time, the investigators must have seen that it was fairly clear from the start that something sinister was happening when Thomas was taken to the hospital, and his body temperature was discovered to be so low. First, the police discovered that Thomas was never in the driveway, but he did not trip and fall there while awaiting the school bus, and that his head and facial injuries were inconsistent with Michael Valva's account of what happened. Thomas Valva's second-degree murder charge against both Michael Valva and his fiancée Angela Pollina following their arrest. There are many reasons to be upset about this case. It appears that Michael and his fiancée Angela had a great security system with both audio and visual components in their home. They appeared to be using this surveillance system in some way to monitor the household's 6 children. Thankfully, this surveillance system was also used to gather evidence to prove that Michael and his fiancée Angela were abusing the children, at least Thomas. Additionally, the evidence that was found was, to put it mildly, disgustingly depressing. The law enforcement was able to capture an audio recording from the morning of Thomas's death. Apparently, Thomas kept falling and was unable to walk, and one of the other kids in the house inquired as to why. Angela responded to the child, because he is hypothermic. When you're washed with cold water and it's freezing, you get hypothermia. Then Michael can be heard entering the room and saying, "He's cold, boo effing who?" Angela eventually asks him, "What are you doing?" To which Michael replies, "I'm suffocating him. That's what I'm doing." Thomas and his 10-year-old brother Anthony were also seen sleeping on the floor of their unheated garage in video footage that the police were able to recover from 2 nights prior to Thomas's murder. The 2 boys shivered without any blankets, pillows, or mattresses. According to Fox, surveillance video showed Pollina hosing Thomas down with water 2 hours prior to the 911 call. Michael Valva gave the investigators the security system's password so they could check it out. But while they were inside watching the footage, another user entered, changed the password, and deleted the videos. Someone attempted to destroy the evidence. By all accounts, the Valva household was undoubtedly a house of horrors. There are just so many people who can attest to the fact that these children were being abused, which is such a big problem because so many people seem to have known that something was wrong in this home, but nothing was done about it. It can be inferred that Michael and Angela subjected Thomas and his older brother to a variety of forms of abuse, such as food deprivation and exposure to bitter cold, by making them spend the night in a garage in the bitter New York weather. When Thomas's mother, Michael Valva's estranged wife, learned of her son's tragic passing, she had a lot to say. At the time, she worked in Rikers Island as a corrections officer. Her name is Justyna Zubko-Valva, and sadly she lost custody of her sons during her divorce in 2017. Like any mother, she had to put up a valiant fight against the choice. She sent the Department of Child Protective Services a flash drive containing 320 files of abuse-related evidence, and she even took pictures of the bruises on her kids' bodies. It's difficult to fathom why she lost custody in the first place, since by all accounts she loved her sons. There are allegations that she was the target of untrue accusations, which she vehemently refuted, but ultimately would still come at the expense of her sons. She claimed that Thomas had a mild form of autism, and that it had been 2 years since she had last seen him or her other 2 sons. She claimed that the next time she saw him was when she was called to the morgue to identify his body. She had provided Child Protective Services with all the evidence she had collected regarding the abuse her sons had experienced while living in Michael's home over a period of years, but they did nothing. In 2018, she uploaded this video to Facebook, where Thomas reveals that their father locks them in a garage as a form of punishment.
Guys. Mommy, yes. It's okay. Just want to play the ball. Guys, you know that's not true, right? You always can hug mommy, kiss mommy, and tell mommy what? That you love mommy and miss mommy, right? Yeah. What's gonna happen if you tell me that you love me and miss me and you give me kiss and a hug? What's gonna happen?
Then Daddy's gonna pull me outside.
Outside?
Yeah.
Where?
In the backyard.
Where in the backyard?
Over there.
What's in the backyard?
Cars. And I can't wear cars if I'm inside out.
It's like jail.
I know it's like jail,
Following Thomas's passing, Mrs. Zubko-Valva filed a $200 million wrongful death lawsuit against a number of CPS caseworkers and investigators, East Marquez Union Free School District administrators, her children's lawyers in their custody dispute, and Nassau County Supreme Court Justice Hope Schwartz Zimmerman.
Reveal exchanges between Mother Justyna and a judge during bitter hearings involving custody of all 3 of her sons, Tommy, Andrew, and Anthony. Mother, my children are coming soaked in urine. Anthony is sleeping in the garage. His hands and feet are bright red, Your Honor. He's not getting any food. Judge, Ms. Valva, move along. I can't remember everything you are saying because you're saying so much. Mother, Your Honor, the CPS is not doing the job because they are closing the reports the next day. The judge denied the mother's motion to return the children to her. Mother, why? On what basis? The children's life is in danger, Your Honor. Judge, because I said so. Attorney Thomas Liotti lodged a formal misconduct complaint against the judges who are elected, not appointed, in the Valva case. The New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct's 11-member panel will decide the judge's fate.
They do not deserve to be judges of any kind, and they should be removed immediately.
In her lawsuit, she claimed that Tommy's death was not only foreseeable but entirely preventable, which is nothing but the absolute truth. According to the document reviewed by The Independent, plaintiff Justyna Zubko-Valva begged, pleaded, and pleaded with defendants for over 3 years to remove Tommy as well as his 2 brothers, Anthony and Andrew, from the custody of Michael Valva and Angela Pollina, who had abused, starved, and tortured the children for years. Yet, the defendants took no action. On the other hand, school officials insist that they had flooded the CPS lines with reports of abuse. Despite the numerous alleged reports, why the children were left in Valva's care is unknown. Ms. Zubko-Valva, however, has since filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the school and CPS employees, claiming that their desperate pleas for assistance and the suffering of their children were flagrantly disregarded. There was evidence from the school district that supported their defense and highlighted the abuse. When they weren't allowed to eat at home, Thomas and his older brother Anthony would cry about it when they arrived at school. When Thomas first started attending school, he had a black eye. A few months later, he had a forehead bruise. Additionally, there are rumors that Anthony, who was compelled to spend the night in the garage in sub-zero temperatures, went to school with frostbite on his hands and feet. According to reports from the school nurse, both boys were quite underweight and frequently arrived at class starving and wearing urine-soaked clothing. The Department of Social Services announced that it would review all interactions and complaints filed with the department over 2 previous years and conduct a thorough investigation.
Are committed to getting to the bottom of the facts of this case and what happened, and to help improve the system so it never happens again.
A little bit too late for an investigation, wouldn't you say? Aside from the mother and the school system, a babysitter fought for the boys. Amanda Wildman worked as the Valva's family babysitter at some point in 2017. She asserted that although they weren't a single large happy blended family, Michael and Angela constantly sought to give off that impression. She recalled that every now and then, they would scream at the boys when the mask would come off. She made it clear that the boys received significantly worse treatment than the girls. Apparently, she went to talk to police detectives about this in 2017, but no formal complaint was filed. We keep wondering why none of these complaints ever gained traction, but there may be one explanation. Sadly, we've seen far too often how much the police love to defend their own. Michael must have believed he would be safe because he never seemed to care about the repercussions of his actions. When Child Protective Services, the DSS, and other parties are aware of what is happening, and all they can do is schedule mandatory home visits, home supervision, and parenting classes, then clearly something is wrong. The kids were never ever taken away from the house. When you think Michael Valva has already done the worst, he continues to act psychopathically and sinisterly. Before being formally detained, he had already created a GoFundMe to cover the cost of Thomas's funeral. This was done immediately after the boy died. Numerous neighbors and friends had already contributed to it before he was exposed and arrested. Killing your child is one thing, and trying to profit off it is something else, the lowest of lows. Eventually, the judge ruled that separate trials were going to be held for the couple, with Michael Valva's trial beginning in September 2022. According to Michael Valva's defense team, Thomas's death was an accident, and they blamed his ex-fiancée, Angela Pollina, branding her a wicked, cruel stepmother. This argument was the reason the case was divided and tried separately.
Suffolk prosecutors described the former NYPD officer as a depraved father who exiled his son Thomas to die in the frigid family garage.
How could anybody, any mother or father, leave a child in a garage at 19 degrees to sleep? I'm sorry. How could you?
Sharon Scarborough says she was Valva's neighbor and came to court today with others to demand justice for Thomas.
The jury, which was made up of 8 women and 4 men, was clearly shaken as they listened to the heartbreaking details of the conditions that Thomas and his brother Anthony endured for years. The children, who were on the autism spectrum and also high functioning, allegedly went to school in filthy clothes. They were usually found scrounging for food in trash cans at school. They were usually bruised, limping around, and sometimes shivering. All this only to return home and be denied food and bathroom access.
Time today, we just saw inside of the Valva-Pollina household through the Nest surveillance system. And now this video was captured when Thomas was still alive. The judge warning people in the courtroom to not give a reaction to the video that they were about to see. And what we saw was inside of the boys' room. Now in the boys' room, there was a bunk bed with a trundle bed underneath. There were many times where we saw Anthony laying on the floor of the boys' room, and some of those times he was laying on pee-pee pads in the room. We also saw a video of him saying, "I have to go to the bathroom, I have to go badly." There was about a dozen videos also of Anthony in the garage. We also saw videos of a tent outside of the Valva-Pollina home with children's shoes outside of it and Michael Valva speaking into that tent. We then saw videos of both Thomas and Anthony in the garage, even staying there at times in the middle of the day. Now today we heard from Sergeant Norberto Flores again. He was the lead detective on this case. He said neighbors' Ring camera captured Thomas unclothed and falling several times in the backyard on the day that he died. Flores says after he watched those videos from inside home surveillance, he called CPS on a day that Thomas had died because he had a concern for the safety of the children in the household.
Anthony LaPinta, the defense attorney, stated in court that Michael never ever thought that either of his boys could die from being in that garage. LaPinta said, "We strongly contend that it's not murder, however distressing, emotionally charged, or disturbing.
Is not to be overwhelmed by the emotions of this case, saying the facts don't add up to murder.
But the testimonies of those who knew the boys paint a different picture. Thomas and Anthony appeared skinny, ate food off the ground, stole food from other students, and pulled partially eaten food out of the trash cans, according to testimony given in court by East Marquez School District employees. Employees at the school reportedly smelled the boys' urine and faces when they arrived. According to a prosecutor, Michael Valva's home was fully outfitted with cameras. Each room was appropriately labeled with the name of each child. Shockingly, the camera in the garage had the unsettling, ominous label, Kids Room. This footage would eventually serve as damning evidence around which they would build their case.
Prosecutors say Thomas Valva and his brother endured years of abuse, and they plan to use surveillance video from inside their home to prove that.
Assistant District Attorney Kirian Kelly emphasized that the world would never know what Thomas could have become and what his impact on the world would have been. He would never have the chance to go through high school, fall in love, or become a father. According to her, Michael stole not only his life but also these experiences from Thomas and those who would have loved to share them with him. Kelly claimed that Michael had an obsession with Angela Pollina and did not mind subjecting the boys to cruel punishment due to this obsession. She highlighted the final night of Thomas's life and his heartbreaking last hours on Earth. Angela was home with the kids and made Thomas go outside naked before washing him in icy water, despite knowing how cold it was, precisely 21 degrees, the day Thomas died. Upon his return, Thomas's father went on to yell cruel words at him. Thomas was fighting for his life and his father was calling him a slob and a moron.
Right before his son collapsed and died, prosecutors say Michael Valva cursed at Thomas, calling him a moron and an idiot and saying he's cold. Boo-hoo.
He died a terrible, 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 painful death.
She emphasized that Thomas did not deserve what happened to him. He deserved good parents and a loving home. She also pointed out a sad truth that no matter the severity of this punishment, Michael Valva would still have 3 meals a day, a bed, heat, and a pillow in prison, rather than having to rummage through the trash for scraps like his boys did.
To impose he will have a cell with a bed and a blanket and a pillow and heat, as well as 3 meals a day. All the things he denied his children.
According to Kelly, Thomas dressed as a prisoner for his last Halloween costume. Thomas was a prisoner who had his death sentence carried out. According to her, the costume sadly represented Thomas's life. They do say that everyone deserves fair representation, so defense attorney Lo Turco made his own arguments. Lo Turco remarked that he wished others could perceive Valva in the same light as they did. He described him as a broken man who was regretful of his deeds and his failures to act. Lo Turco characterized the crime as one of negligence and recklessness rather than intent. Before the sentencing, Judge William Condon said that he thought Michael's apology was sincere and then said that the trial was the most stressful experience of his life. He could not help but ask how the community could have allowed such vile acts to continue for so long.
How did all of us, as a community, allow this to happen?
In his ruling, the judge claimed that Thomas and Anthony lived their lives under constant duress in their own homes, the place they should have felt safest. Furthermore, he claimed that Valva behaved more like a warden who used starvation and punishment rather than a father who protected his children. He emphasized that Thomas was an 8-year-old boy who should have been getting excited for Christmas, but unfortunately, he was now dead. All this was said with a heavy and emotional voice. The former NYPD officer Michael Valva was then sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for the second-degree murder of his son, Thomas Valva, and for endangering the welfare of a child.
I just want to say it was so extremely difficult to, sit in the courtroom, listen to obviously all the facts related to my son Thomas's death. I just kept thinking about how much abuse all my children encounter from the hands of those 2 abusers, Michael and Angela. For years, day after day after day, being deprived from food, shelter, the basics, what every child should be provided with. I kept thinking about all the institutions who failed to help him, who completely basically did absolutely nothing. Now everybody's trying to do the right thing, but where were you when I begged you for help? When you could have saved my child's life? I did file a complaint with Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. I did file a complaint with Nassau County District Attorney's Office, FBI, Suffolk County Police, Nassau County Police, Attorney General. Nobody helped my children.
Valva then apologized to the judge. In his own words, "I am truly sorry. I am regretful, ashamed, heartbroken, and grief-stricken, having contributed to the death of my son Thomas. I loved my son Thomas with all my heart. Pollina and I dreamed of having a big, happy family, but things didn't go as planned." When in tears, he added, "I lost focus on how to be a good father." Facing Judge William Condon, he said, "I didn't want my son to die. I accept your sentence. I have already sentenced myself to a life of extreme regret, remorse, and grief."
Truly sorry. I am regretful, ashamed, heartbroken, and grief-stricken.
Ex-cop
Gino Carli, the father of Angela Pollina's youngest daughters, asserted that he did not think Valva's tears and apologies were sincere. "The boy is dead. How is that justice?" he asked. Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney declared that this was one of the most challenging and heartbreaking cases he had handled in his nearly 30-year career as a prosecutor. No prison sentence is sufficient for the heinous abuse this defendant subjected his own children to. He vowed that Suffolk County would have adequate safeguards in place to ensure that this never happens again.
Social services leaders say publicly for the first time that changes were made the day after Thomas's death. Supervisors must now make a deep dive into any case with more than 4 allegations of child abuse and neglect.
As for Angela Pollina, her trial jury selection was held sometime in February 2023. Just like Michael Valva, Angela Pollina also entered a not guilty plea. The mother of the boys, Justyna Zubko-Valva, expressed her concerns and expressed her desire for a life sentence.
Degree murder, I don't understand that is a second-degree murder. They kept telling me that that's the highest they can go. No, you can go higher. You have to set up the standards. That case like that, all the children out there who are in similar situation, who are similarly abused, are gonna know that crime like that is punishable to the highest extent of the law, not to the second extent of the law. Thomas deserves much more than that. The justice needs to be served. Where?
During her trial, similar evidence, including text messages between Pollina and Michael Valva, was highlighted. In those messages, Pollina often insisted Thomas and Anthony sleep in the garage of their Centre Moriquez home and not be allowed to use the bathrooms inside. Surprisingly, she acknowledged her discipline method was evil and blamed her fiancé for Thomas's death. During the trial, Angela Pollina also testified that she had deleted surveillance footage and did not realize it was wrong to force the 2 boys to live in the garage in the bitter cold until Thomas passed away. By March 2023, Angela Pollina was found guilty of the second-degree murder of Thomas Valva and 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a child.
Please rise and face the jury. How do you find the defendant, Angela Pollina, as to count 1, murder in the second degree? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
How do you find the defendant, Angela Pollina, as to count 2, endangering the welfare of a child? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
How do you find the defendant as to count 3, endangering the welfare of a child? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
How do you find the defendant as to count 4, endangering the welfare of a child? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
How do you find the defendant as to count 5, endangering the welfare of a child? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Just like her ex-fiancé, she was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.